smaller districts, much more compact, usually very similar, whether they're urban, suburban, rural, a little bit of a couple things here and there. Senators have all of those things in all of their districts because they represent states.
He said there is a long way to go before the bill gets to the president's desk.
It's easy to rail against blue states, but we have a growing number of people who are coming from blue states. We're making blue states redder. And so we have to remember that as we kind of go through all of these pieces, it's not just the ruby red MAGA districts, because there's just not enough of them to pass a legislation or to win a majority.
He went on to say once something is passed on the beautiful bill, it will be a net positive for Trump. He said similar battles were fought amongst conservatives on legislation during Trump's first term. Iran's foreign minister has said that the U.S. strikes in Tehran have caused serious damage. Here's Fox's Greg Palcott.
Iran's Ayatollah Ali Khamenei emerged after his country was battered by Israel and U.S. strikes. He claimed Iran had delivered a slap to America's face by striking a U.S. airbase in Qatar, which left no impacts or injuries. He also warned against further attacks. The head of the UN nuclear watchdog agency, Rafael Grossi, reiterated the damage done by Israeli and U.S. strikes at Iranian nuclear facilities is very considerable, and that he can only assume the centrifuges are not operational. Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson also conceded that nuclear installations have been badly damaged. In Tel Aviv, Greg Palcott, Fox News.
6 Americans were detained in South Korea today for trying to send 1,600 plastic bottles filled with rice, miniature Bibles, $1 bills, and USB sticks toward North Korea by sea, according to police. Police also say the Americans were apprehended before throwing the bottles into the sea so they could float toward North Korea. They said the Americans are being investigated on allegations they violated the law on the management of safety and disasters. A tense standoff on a busy Texas highway yesterday. Here's Fox's Ted Linder.
It all began after authorities say a 64-year-old woman intentionally crashed into an 18-wheeler before pulling out a lawn chair and sitting down in the middle of I-45, armed with a revolver, and refused to move. That sparked a 5-hour negotiation. The woman, who has a history of mental illness, held the gun to her head as crisis teams worked to defuse the situation. It was her daughter's arrival that helped bring a peaceful end. No one was hurt. Officials say the woman will receive mental health treatment. Ted Lindner, Fox News.
Fox Weather says the National Hurricane Center is monitoring an area of disturbed weather over Central America. That is expected to briefly move over the Bay of Campeche this weekend. Even if the system were to organize, any impacts would remain well south of the U.S.-Mexico border near Tampico, Mexico, which is roughly about 300 miles south of Texas. AAA says the average price for a gallon of gas is $3.21. A month ago, it was $3.17, and 1 year ago, it was $3.50. And that is all our time for now. You can find more news at afn.net, and we certainly thank you for listening. For American Family News, I'm Robert Thornton.
At Wesley Biblical Seminary, we believe God is raising up a movement across our nation and around the world who hold fast to the inerrancy of Scripture and the hope of holiness. We do this through bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees, certificate programs, and even training for lay people. So whatever your next step is in being equipped for ministry, we're here for you. And if you believe these are the kind of pastors we need leading churches in the future, we invite you to think about giving to Wesley Biblical Seminary. Learn more about us at wbs.edu.
Hello, and welcome to the Dr. Nurse Mama Show, prescribing hope for healthy families here on American Family Radio. Here's your host, Professor, Pediatric Nurse Practitioner, and Mom of 4, Dr. Jessica Peck.
Well, hey there, friends, and welcome to my favorite part of the afternoon, getting to spend time with you, prescribing hope for healthy families. And it is Friday. Yay! I'm so excited that it's Friday. I love the season of summer. I don't know why. It just feels different. I've been a mom for a long time now, so I've gotten used to the rhythm of having my kids at home and having no homework and no lunches and just kind of a generally more relaxed pace. And it's a little odd because I've been a nurse working night shifts and all kinds of different things. So maybe you relate to that. And sometimes the weeks don't feel very regular, but Friday just always brings with it a special kind of joy. And it is Ask Dr. Nurse Mama Friday. I'm going to be answering some of your questions today about tech. Now, if you've been following along since January, 52 Habits for Healthy Families, listen, these are science-supported, research-backed daily disciplines that you can use to really change the dynamic of your family. There is no life hack. There is no miracle cure. There is nothing that's going to make your family instantly the perfect family overnight, or really ever, if I'm really honest. But we can have healthy families. And that is the goal of this show. That is why I come on every single day. That's why my producer, my team, and I, we pray very much that God would give us wisdom to be able to give you information that equips you, that encourages you, that empowers you. Because we know if you're here listening, that your heartbeat just cries for a healthy family. That is what you want more than anything in life, is just for your family, your relationships to be healthy. So we started in January. If you've missed it, you can go to the Dr. Nurse Mama Coaching Minutes. You can find that on the podcast, on AFR's website, on their app. And you can catch just 1 minute little updates of what those habits are, or you can listen to any Friday show where I go into greater detail. We started in January with spiritual disciplines, and then we talked about some rhythms for your family. We talked about some communication techniques, and then we started to talk about just some healthy habits, and now we're talking about tech, all things tech. Now, some of the things that we've covered specifically in our tech-saturated world are talking about watching media with your family, and especially those things that are edifying, those things that are faith-based. We talked about being in pictures and using pictures, your home family photos, as a means of discipleship. We talked about unplugging when you're on vacation and having some time away, because we are in a world where we're 24/7 connected, and vacation is different. We talked last week about having tech-free zones, having those places where technology does not rudely interrupt your surroundings. And this week, I'm talking about tech-free times. So we're going to spend a few more weeks here talking about tech, because there are a lot of things to talk about. And whether this impacts you personally or whether you have family members that this impacts, there is wisdom here for us all to share. And the verse that I'm meditating on this week comes from Psalm 62. It's 62:5. For God alone, O my soul, wait in silence, for my hope is from him. And we have a world that is on 24/7. I know I've said this before. Many of you probably remember the world where the TV would actually go off at midnight, the Star Spangled Banner would play, and then it was just those bars that would go across the TV, and you were out of luck. You had nothing to read but the cereal box or the shampoo bottle until the morning, and we just don't have that anymore. When you look at the amount of content it's estimated about 300 hours of content is uploaded to YouTube every minute. Now, what are kids supposed to do with that kind of overload? That's why we all spend 3 hours trying to decide what we're going to watch, because, we don't have just the 3 things to pick from Blockbuster, or the 3 channels that we're going to fix with the rabbit ears. I know I'm getting all nostalgic today, but that's the Gen Xer coming out in me, and I don't apologize for it. But let's dive in and let's talk about it, because I've got some things to say today, and I might get a little preachy. I'll try not to, but I feel really passionate. So listen in. One of the things that is really bothering me as a pediatric nurse practitioner, as a professor, and as a mom who has kids who are now older teenagers and young adults, I am really, really worried about COVID-19. I know you probably didn't expect me to say that. Some of you think, no, we don't talk about that. I don't want to talk about that. Listen, we may want to move on from COVID. We may think, I don't want to talk about that anymore at all. But the reality, from my perspective, is that the world is bearing witness right now to a technological explosion of innovation that happened during COVID that has catastrophic impact on young people in this generation. And we've got to acknowledge it. And looking back at 2020, that's a year that really shall forever live in infamy. the public rejoiced because there wasn't severe physical illness or death in children. This is true. And that was a blessing. That was the case. And that was something to be celebrated. But the public narrative really became, well, COVID is not a kid thing. It's not impacting kids. I want to go on record as saying I continue to be extremely concerned about the ongoing impacts of the social, emotional, and psychological injuries that our children endured during the COVID-19 lockdowns. It is devastating, the things that happened. And we're really still trying to all put that together. It's hard to do. And it's hard to do that from a research-based perspective, that where we're not letting emotions drive the narrative, which we all have emotions. Clearly, I do too. But we've got to follow the facts. So let me walk you through kind of what I've been thinking about. Now, as children shifted to remote learning, when school was canceled, when all of their extracurricular activities were canceled, when every physical social interaction with anyone outside their immediate family was canceled. They didn't see neighbors. We had grandparents who were afraid to see their grandkids, and those fears were very real, and they changed family dynamics. And we had parents who were preoccupied with stressors, including, do I transition to remote work? Do I lose my work? Do I work on the front line, but maybe I'll bring COVID home to my family? All of these things. Will my family members get sick? We have economic pressures now because inflation is going through the roof, and we're trying to manage homeschooling. Now, one good thing that came out of that is we had a lot of parents who did get more engaged with their kids' schooling. And we've seen a resurgence or a surge actually in homeschooling and other ways that parents are being more involved in schooling, which is great because we need that. Now we see social media platforms like TikTok, and they were popular before the pandemic, but it exploded in popularity during the lockdowns because kids had nothing else to do except be on their phones. There were a lot of instances where kids were even afraid to go outside because what if I run into the neighbor kid? And we seeped our kids in this culture of fear where they started to fear their friends and their family and their neighbors because it was a fear-driven narrative. Now, kids who were born as digital natives, they became even more tech savvy because they were using remote learning platforms. We threw screen time out the window because we would say, don't have screen time. Oh, but screen is the only way that you're going to go to school or have any interaction with the outside world or do anything that distracts you so that I can get whatever done that I need to have done. But we had a rise of educational apps. We had a rise of online tutors. Those were common. And because kids couldn't gather in person, it normalized talking to people online. Now, at first, maybe they just talked to people they knew, but it really blurred the lines to think it's just normal to talk to people online. And we had augmented reality learning tools. These were used in school, but it really starts to blur the lines for kids who have not developed the ability to think concretely. They couldn't think that it's hard for them to imagine what's real and what's really not real. We had gamification of nearly everything. And that also distorts some ethical lines because we started to gamify real life situations. Now, I have followed several advocacy groups who have really advocated against this. And I'm going to say some things that are a little difficult to hear. I'll say them as softly as I can, but you may want to adjust your listening audience. But we have gamifying of assault. We have gamifying of really, well, that's all I'm going to say about that. But you can just use your imagination. Imagine the most horrible kinds of assault that you can imagine. And these things are being gamified online. All of this is just because we had this huge innovation of technology, which there's some good things that came out of that, but there's also risk. And my concern is that we're using this as an experimentation ground for our kids. And we're letting our kids have the great social experiment and try all of these things when we really don't know how, if, or when, or if they're safe. And that's concerning. Now, the advent of artificial intelligence, or AI, has literally changed the world indelibly, permanently in the last 2 years. And now we imagine a world where kids grow up with these technological advances that are considered a normal part of culture. So just walk through with me here. Let's look at the landscape of childhood. So instead of seeking unstructured outside playtime where they're using their imaginations, they're using their bodies to be active, kids are increasingly seeking sedentary online activities. They're in the house all day, sitting, gaming, consuming media. I know because I've served as a camp nurse for more than a decade in the summers, and I see all of these kids come in and they have a really hard time adjusting to outside. And they tell me, I usually just sit on a screen. We now have digital communication is preferred over real person interaction. Kids would prefer that you text them. You've probably seen reels about this, or maybe stories about this, or maybe someone has told you this in person. Younger kids can tend to get offended if older generations actually call them on the phone. They think that's rude. Why didn't you text? So a call seems like so intrusive when, as older generations, we view that as a measure of respect. I said we. Yes, I did. I'm older. I say just pick up the phone and call them. It's better to call. But kids have fear of in-person interactions in some contexts because they can order everything on a kiosk or online. They don't have as much practice in reading body language. They don't know how to have healthy conflict resolution. It's just unfriend, disconnect, just ghost them, don't just walk away. Instant gratification is normalized because kids have immediate access to an endless array of electronic entertainment. This is relying on dopamine. They're seeking dopamine hits. That's all that they want, is that dopamine, serotonin, those feel-good hits from watching something that makes me laugh, watching something that makes me feel like, oh, other feel-good hormones. They're using these to emotionally regulate. It's also very, very normal for families to individually consume electronic media on a personal device. How often are you sitting in your living room? This tends to happen in my family too, where you have everybody with their phone, their iPad, their laptop, whatever it is, their device, and everybody's watching their own thing. We're all in the same room, but there is a difference in watching something together and experiencing an emotional journey together and being able to talk about what you saw together. And that weekend's bonding time. We also have hyperstimulation of short-form digital content. So we are literally changing the structure of kids' brains by training them to only pay attention for 30 or 40 seconds. That's scary. We have traditional gatekeeping by present adults who are physically present with physical barriers. They prevent you from having an early exposure, maybe to violent or explicit content or from taking a risk behavior. But now we just have unsupervised online time. We have a steady supply of predators. We have thousands of strangers who are streaming into our children's bedrooms, their most intimate spaces, every night, unsupervised. This is something we got to wake up out of our apathy. We've got to engage. We also have artificial intelligence enabling nudifying apps. I said nudifying. That means allowing innocent pictures and videos, removing clothing from those, and generating explicit material. We have AI used to generate chatbots that are personally designed and curated to be a child's friend. They can name them what they want, dress them what they want, and train them to be their friend. I even saw a news report this week of a man actually proposing to a chatbot and crying, being overjoyed when she, I use that term loosely because it's not a person, said, yes, this is concerning. I've got more things that are concerning when we come back. But don't go away because there is help and hope. Before we finish today, I'm going to talk about how you can have an unplugged, old-fashioned summer, the kind that we all dream about, running through the hose and then getting your water from there because, oh my goodness, heavens to Betsy. Can't believe we were that wild and crazy, but we were. When we come back, more on Tech Free Times. I'll see you on the other side of this break.
Jesus said he will return like a thief in the night. This revelation has led many Christians to assume the Lord's return is entirely unpredictable, but this statement does not apply to believers. While the exact moment is known only by the Father, Christians aren't meant to be unaware. Paul writes, "But you, brethren, are not in darkness, that the day should overtake you like a thief, for you are all sons of light and sons of day." With the Holy Spirit's illumination and Scripture's guidance, we can discern the season of Christ's return. This awareness should spark a sense of urgency, calling us to holy living and urgent evangelism. Each passing day is borrowed time, an opportunity to align our lives with God's eternal calling. The question isn't, when will He return, but how will He find us living when He does? This is Tim Moore wishing you Godspeed.
Jesus is the only hope for the world. Find out more at christinprophecy.org.
Hi, I'm Jan Harper. If you are a pastor's wife, come be encouraged and renewed as you share your challenges and stresses unique to pastors and their wives.
The AFA Pastors and Wives Fishbowl Retreat is coming October 28th through the 30th. You're invited to join us at Pickwick Landing State Park in Counce, Tennessee for 3 days of encouragement, renewal, and worship. Once again, Brother Bert Harper, AFA Director of Family and Pastoral Ministries, will host the retreat along with his wife Jan. Our special speaker will be J.J. Jasper of American Family Radio. If you've attended in the past, we'd love to see you again. And if you've never experienced a fishbowl retreat, we especially invite you to be refreshed and renewed. The per-couple admission price includes lodging, meals, and materials. Visit repairingthefoundations.net to learn more and register. That's repairingthefoundations.net.
The AFA Pastors and Wives Fishbowl Retreat. We'd love to see you there.
This is John MacArthur. Join me for today's Portraits of Grace. When John Bunyan was imprisoned for preaching the gospel, he was deeply concerned about his family. He wrote, I saw in this condition, I was a man who was pulling down his house upon the head of his wife and children. Yet I thought, I must do it. The dearest idol I have known, whate'er that idol be, help me to tear it from thy throne and worship only thee, he wrote. Well, despite his personal grief, the suffering of his family, he was willing to sacrifice the most precious thing he had, if that's what God wanted him to do. That's always the final standard of faith. Jesus said, if anyone wishes to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. I hope you're willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for Christ. This is John MacArthur encouraging you to live as portraits of grace.
Oh Lord, I need you now more than ever. Would you put my heart back together? I searched the world till my head hurt just to find out your ways better. Oh, oh, your ways better. Oh, oh, your ways better. Oh, Lord, your ways better. Jesus, your ways better. Lord, I am so thankful for the ways that you bless me. Everything you say, making waves like a jet ski. You love every part of me, even when I was messy. Now I see the art in your beauty, so I can finally sing out. Jehovah Jireh, provider. Your way always gets me higher. Even on my darkest days,
Better. They're just going to keep on playing it. Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. See, apparently I came in too soon. I think my team was giving me a subtle message that we want to keep playing that song. It is a great message that God's way is better. And I think that is a real struggle for families today, especially for parents. I was just talking with my team about how this generation gap between Gen X, even between millennials and Gen Z, it just seems huge. And we can give them such an encouraging message, not a shaming message, not a our world was so much better than your world. I would hate to grow up in your world, all these negative messages that we give them. But we can empower them and partner our old school skills with their fresh world perspective and really have an intergenerational bond. And that is really what is biblically modeled to us. We can have older women teach the younger women and all of those ways that we see generations teaching and helping each other. Today is Ask Dr. Nurse Mama Friday, and I'm talking about the post-COVID, which we're really not post-COVID because COVID is still impacting our world. We're talking about the ways that COVID lockdowns impacted our kids. And we're tying that into the healthy habit this week, which is creating tech-free zones in your house. So I want you to think about creating some zones, some places that are tech-free. And that can be really, really hard to do because screens have really invaded every area of our life. So that means we have to be intentional about it. Now, I was talking about some of the risks that have come with increased online innovation. And I do want to talk about one more thing that is a little difficult to talk about. So adjust your listening audience. I've talked about this before, but one of the things I'm very concerned about is the rise of something called sextortion. Now, this is extortion using explicit images, and it is happening to a lot of really great kids who just make poor decisions. When we put a phone into a kid's hands, sometimes their thumb moves faster than the prefrontal cortex in their brain. The prefrontal cortex is what directs our executive decision making. It's logic. What develops first for kids in their brain is their amygdala. That's their emotions, their fear-driven response. And so sometimes it can just be tempting just to impulsively, because kids are impulsive, click something on your phone, and then all of a sudden you are pulled down a rabbit hole that you never intended to be in. So for those of you who maybe haven't heard this concept before, sextortion is where people online will go and look. They're looking specifically for kids who are easy to target. That's kids with public social media accounts, because there's a lot of what the intelligence community actually calls open source information. I know who's your principal, who's your pastor, who's your parent, and I can blackmail you pretty easily. They usually will pose as a peer that would be appealing, relationally appealing in whatever context that is. They pull them into a relationship, and before they know it, they're exchanging explicit text messages, audio messages, photos, videos. And then when that person sends that information and they have that information to blackmail, then the person, the extortionist, is saying, you give me more, or I'm going to tell your parents, or I'm going to, you give me money, or whatever it is. I just saw some research that was released by Thorn, which is an organization that actually is committed to using digital solutions to fight human trafficking. And this is what they reported this week, what came across my inbox. 1 in 5 teens, 1 in 5, report experiencing sextortion. 1 in 5. That is the first time I've seen that big of a statistic, but it didn't surprise me, just given what I see in the context of my everyday interactions. 1 in 7 of those kids were driven to self-harm as a result. 81% of the threats are occurring exclusively online. 1 in 6 children were under 12 years old when they were extorted. 1 in 8 was extorted by a deep fake. That's that nudifying technology that I was talking about. Someone made of them. So they may see that image and they think, I didn't do that image. I didn't give that. That's not me. But how is everybody else going to know that's not me? Who's going to believe me? And 44% of the kids reported that imagery used to extort them was acquired without their consent. Now, what does that mean? That was kind of wordy. It means that these are just public pictures taken off the internet. Maybe I see your friend has a public account and they posted a picture of you at the ice cream shop, and I took that and I made it something different. This is something that is really terrifying, and we really have to face the realities that kids are facing today. So I've talked about that on other shows, and so I'm not going to spend too much time on it today, but just to say that is increasing. And I do think that a contributing factor is the increased online normalization, access, and innovation that's happened in the wake of COVID-19. Now, other things that we're seeing, I'm only going to give you doom and gloom for a little bit longer, so hang in there with me. But these are important realities that I think we in older generations need to face. So these are the main things that I'm looking at the kids have lost in this pull into the online world and in screen saturation. They have a loss of unstructured play. They don't play outside as much, just like I talked about. They, instead of going outside to entertain themselves, I don't know if you remember, I grew up in the generation where it was, you better find something to do or I'll give you something to do. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Kids need to learn to entertain themselves, but they're used to now being passively entertained all the time. They also have instant gratification. They have all that access is always on. It is disrupting kids' sleep norms. And I've talked about this quite a bit. That was 2 weeks we spent on healthy habits on sleep, because screens before bed, having that exposure to blue light suppresses melatonin production. And what do? Well, let's just take melatonin. We're having all of these instant fixes instead of going to the core problem. But I see it definitely. I see it in practice where they look at their devices all night long. It's disrupting their circadian rhythms. It's even changing the way that they grow. And we don't have evening family rituals as much, talking about the day or winding down together. We just have everybody on their screens for some downtime before you go to bed. We have changing attention spans, like I talked about, premature exposure to mature content. All of these things are really difficult. And in the light of that, it's easy to feel like the phone police. And we're constantly monitoring screen time. We're constantly enforcing limits, thinking how much screen time you have, or we're using it as barter, right? We're using it as, okay, I'm taking away your screen time. I'll give you screen time. It's a punishment. It's a reward. And ultimately, I think most of us feel like we're just losing a battle against the pull of those digital devices. But what if this summer, as we're looking at healthy habits, what instead of cracking down and being strict, what if we invited our kids, our spouses, our families into something better? Instead of trying to limit screen time, what if we focused our energy and attention on providing a compelling alternative? What if we, as parents, as grandparents, aunts, uncles, mentors, cousins, husbands, wives, we offered not just restrictions. We didn't offer shaming. Get off your phone. Get off your phone. Are you going to talk to me? But rhythms, not rules, but relationships. And the truth is, as followers of Christ, we believe our children are not just consumers of technology. They're not a product to be sold or sold to. They're not consumers. They are image bearers of God. That means they're creative and they're curious and they're wired for connection. And summer gives us an opportunity to shape their hearts, not just their habits, but we can shape their hearts through our habits. So I challenge you to trade control for invitation. Anytime you feel like you're just trying to control their tech use, change the narrative, flip the paradigm, and invite them to something different. Show them the joy of gathering around a table instead of a tablet. Chase fireflies instead of chasing algorithms. Hear the stories of the older people in their family instead of just scrolling strangers. I have said this multiple times, but one of our prior guests, she said something that has haunted me, that our kids, this generation of kids, is going to die with more memories of other people's lives than of their own because they spend so much time watching other people's stories that they don't even know. But with a little intention and a lot of grace for them and for us, we can help our families rediscover that simple, soul-filling magic of an unplugged life. Doesn't that sound wonderful? So today I wanted to spend some time talking about how to cultivate an old-fashioned summer. And I encounter a lot of skeptics, and people ask me, how do you do this? Because my kid does not want to engage. They are not interested in the least in joining me in anything. But there are ways that you can do it. And I can say I've done and I do a lot of things wrong, but this is one thing that I've got. Because even the other day, my husband and I were going to go on a walk. Oh, that's just the Texas that came out in me. We are going to go out on a walk. And the next thing I know, one kid's behind us, the second kid's behind us, the third kid's behind us. We're walking as a family. If you invite that, you can learn a way to cultivate that. I believe it because I've lived it. You can fill your lives with fun. Kids are really craving fun. And so often in our interactions with them, it's all about coaching them, lecturing them, telling them what they need to do, or doing the business of everyday life, taking them to the store, get them shoes, get them fed. They need us to have fun with them. They need real connection across generations, not with guilt or pressure, but with joy and hope. And a reminder, let me remind you today that what kids long for most is not their screen. They don't want their phone more than anything in the world, even though it seems that way. They want us. So do you remember when summer meant your shoulders were sunburned, which they shouldn't be, as the nurse here does not endorse that, but they were, right, when we were growing up, or your knees were grass stained, and the jingle of the ice cream truck coming down the street, which my kids now think is really creepy. The ice cream truck is creepy, but that's okay. That's just generational differences. But were you one of those kids who rode your bike until the streetlights came on? Or did you build forts out of sticks and bed sheets? Or did you drink from the hose without even thinking a second? The only thing you thought about is letting it run long enough so that the water's not too hot and doesn't burn your mouth. There were backyard campouts, mason jar lanterns, homemade lemonade stands, Climbing trees, skipping rocks, trading baseball cards, grandparents' time, cousin time, and the sprinkler, and boredom really wasn't a problem. It was a doorway to imagination. Now, these really are rhythms of simpler days when time moved slower, screens were rare, and those best memories were made face to face and hand in hand and heart to heart. We can have that now. So I want you to think about your summer and think about what could you do in your family this summer that's something that's not watching a screen. If you're just going to have a movie night, which those are not bad every now and then, what could you do that would be really out of pocket? That's a great way to kind of change the energy in your family. If you feel like you're stuck in a rut, if you feel like maybe one of your kids is having a struggle and you just feel like most days are filled with conflict and lecture, do something really unexpected. It changes the energy and it cultivates their curiosity. They're curious to see, maybe I'm going to express skepticism, and don't expect your kids to say, "Oh, wow, that's such a great idea, Mother. How can I help?" They won't do that, but just embrace their reluctance. They're just trying to find their safe place. So maybe you camp in the backyard. Maybe you host a neighborhood camp out. Maybe you go camping. If that's something that your kids think you would never do, maybe go and do that. I've told this story before, but one thing I did with my kids, we were in Louisiana. We went out on an airboat, and we were looking for alligators, of course, and didn't find very many. Before we knew it, the guy that was our guide, he opened a cooler and pulled out an alligator. It was a baby alligator-ish, like, I don't know, maybe a couple feet long. I don't know how, I'm not an alligator expert, but my kids were like, no way is she going to hold that. And I did. And it was just something out of my comfort zone. And they remembered it. They laughed. It gave them courage. They wanted to hold the alligator. And as I've said before, I may or may not, as the nurse thinking about salmonella, have used hand sanitizer afterwards. And that my kids will still troll me about the guy saying, "Lady, my gator ain't dirty. You don't need to use that." I still used it. I can't help it. I'm a nurse. So those old habits die hard. Maybe you can have, here's just some ideas for you. Maybe you can have an intergenerational cooking project. Maybe you can host your own kind of cooking show. Maybe you can have elders teach kids family recipes. Maybe you can bake something from scratch. Maybe you can have a recipe competition where you have people come over and vote. Maybe you have a family recipe book, or you have a kids versus grown-up cook-off. Maybe you pull out some retro games. Maybe you teach them how to play marbles, jacks, hopscotch, kick the can, charades, or how to build a blanket fort. And you have the grandparents share their favorite childhood games. Maybe you have story circles. You set aside some time at night for older generations to share some stories. I know my kids' grandparents have shared some stories they've never heard before. It has been very entertaining. Maybe you even have a family story podcast that you start on your own. It can be really simple, something that you just record. These are ways to use technology for good. You could have a time travel day and live for a day in a different decade and show kids what it was like. Maybe you have a pen pal or write postcards, or you grow something together. That's not happening in my house, just FYI, because my mother-in-law, bless her, she has the greenest thumb I know, and she tells me I have a black thumb. It's so true. I cannot grow things, but my kids like to see me try. The key is to slow down, invite curiosity, and lean into that shared experience. Let kids see that fun does not need a charger, okay? Can we get an amen for that? And that family stories and laughter and traditions are treasures that never go out of style. So when we come back, I'm going to talk some more and give you some practical tips about how to have some tech-free zones in your home. And we'll talk about how Jesus modeled this for us. I know, it kind of made me curious. I'll share with you what I learned when we come back.
The loss of a child through abortion, miscarriage, or stillbirth affects the emotional health of families. Feelings of anger, sadness, and regret can be overwhelming. There is hope and healing in the aftermath of a reproductive loss. Call the International Helpline at 866-482-LIFE to talk with someone who has been where you are and healed to help others. Your call is confidential. 866-482-LIFE.
Some would say truth is relative, and to the world, that's right. What the world considers to be truth fluctuates depending on the narrative they're trying to promote. Of course, we know truth is found in Scripture, and it never changes. The documentary, The God Who Speaks, proves the Bible's reliability as the source of real truth and reinforces our belief in it as our firm foundation. Watch it anytime at stream.afa.net. That's stream.afa.net.
How about this? Some actual good news on the healthcare front, even as costs just keep skyrocketing. So if you're 65 or older, MediShare now offers MediShare 65 Plus. Call them. You can talk to them about this. A lot of people are taking advantage of this now because even if you have Medicare Parts A and B, you know there are out-of-pocket things, deductibles and copays that just keep going up. And the whole point is to help you by giving you a low, consistent monthly payment that fills in the gaps. In fact, I can tell you how much MediShare 65 Plus is. For example, it's $99 a month up to age 75. It keeps costs under control. That helps with peace of mind. MediShare is trusted too. It's been around for 30 years, and it's a community of people who help each other. Business owners, retirees, pastors, teachers. People love being part of it. Here's the number you can call now. They are easy to talk to. Call 833-45-BIBLE. That's 833-45-BIBLE. 833-45-BIBLE.
Without even seeing them show up, I could feel like the darkness.
Jamie Sanchez is another Christian business proprietor who has been targeted for his faith. His Drip Cafe was opened to serve and help the homeless of downtown Denver.
We believe sex outside of marriage and homosexuality is a sin in God's eyes. And the enemy and his minions decided to use that as a platform.
Jesus told us persecution would come.
I would see them, just the rage and the hate. I pictured them doing that at the foot of the cross to Jesus. And I just remembered what he said, "Forgive them, Father, they know not what they do." And so I had to position my heart that way.
The Jamie Sanchez story is one of the videos of the Impact series at stream.afa.net.
It's been a crazy, crazy ride.
See Jamie's story and much more at stream.afa.net.
Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Lord. Every hour, every moment, I will sing. Thank you, Lord.
Welcome back, friends. That is Thank You by Highlands Worship. And on this Ask Dr. Nurse Mama Friday, I am so thankful for you. I am so thankful for our listeners. I've had some emails, some messages, some letters this week that are just so encouraging. I can't tell you how much it warms my heart and how much it encourages me to know that there are people out there who are supporting American Family Radio, who are listening every single day, who say that we feel like friends to you. It really is a family. And I am so appreciative of your heart to minister to your family. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to sit alongside you in these afternoons and be able to share my heart with you and the message that God has given me. I really want to encourage, equip, and empower you to have a healthy family. And today we're talking about doing that through our healthy habit of having tech-free zones. Now, one of the most common questions I do is how can we do this? And can we not turn back time? And we can't turn back time because, listen, the proverbial train has left the station. Technology is not going backwards. It is not going to reverse itself. Now, we do see some healthy trends. We see some younger generation rejecting a little bit of the publicness of media and the invasion and intrusion of media in their lives. One of the things I've seen recently that's trending is Gen Z using something really novel called a digital camera. And it's so entertaining to see them explain this to older generations. Like, did you know there's a device that's just a camera? Like, it's not your phone, but they use that when they want to go on a vacation or take pictures of something where they don't want the distraction of their phone. So we see some of those things where generations are self-correcting in a way. But many of you may have heard of a book called The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. It's a runaway bestseller, and I get questions about that all the time. What do I think about that? And I've been pretty honest in saying that my concern is that his recommendations largely revolve around removing phones, delaying access to phones, not allowing access to social media. Those things are not bad in and of themselves, but using it as a catch-all is essentially trying to turn back time. It's trying to deny a reality that is here. And I think that may work for a season, but it is not a sustainable strategy. And another thing that I have a concern about is, as a professed atheist, the premise of Haidt's work is that parents and other caring adults, basically, we have the power to restore childhoods of yesteryear, solve the mental health epidemic. And for me as a Christian, I really believe that I need the power of a living God. And I want to give my kids a greater hope that doesn't disappoint, a hope that's not just for living well in this world, but living well for eternity. And that always relies on relying on God to change us, to transform us, to equip us, to protect us. I am not strong enough, wise enough, powerful enough to do all of those things on my own. I need God's help. And when we depend on ourselves for our own solution, for our own rescue, I think that makes people afraid. And we have a fear-saturated culture because I'm afraid. What if I'm never enough? What if I'm not enough? What if I'm not strong enough, wise enough, smart enough? Well, here's the spoiler. We're not. But when we depend on God, we can rest in that. And we can know that through our weaknesses, He is made strong. And in this fear-saturated culture, kids need adults who are willing to engage in those faith-informed relationship-building skills. And if you're as concerned for this generation and the generations behind them as I am, I urge you to pray for them consistently and earnestly. Pray that God would rise up leaders in that generation. The second thing you can do is seek to be a disciple of Christ yourself. Model prioritizing, seeking spiritual disciplines, because our kids are going to do what we do more than they do what we say. And then we can lead with courage and empathy. We speak truth, but with compassion for the realities of the challenges of living in today's world. We really don't know what that's like from a lived experience, and we have to have some compassion. And what I'm challenging you to do specifically today is create tech-free zones. Have some tech-free traditions as a compelling alternative to in this world where we're really living with saturated screens. So that we're not anti-technology. Reframe it and think of yourself as being pro-connection. When people think you hate technology, say, no, I love connection. Technology can provide connection, but I like connection more than I like technology. We have to acknowledge that reality. Screens are everywhere. Their school, their work, their social life, and newsflash, they're even in most churches. I mean, we cannot get away from a screen for the life of us. And parents often feel overwhelmed or guilty, but we can't add shame to that, to our kid, to the parents feeling that. We got to give hope. We're not battling devices. We're not fighting phones. We're inviting hearts to reawaken to God's presence. It's not about restriction. It's about restoration. Tech-free time is not a punishment. It's a pathway back to what matters most. Now, Jesus did this. He modeled presence. And when he was healing people, when he had those interactions, he did not multitask. And that's a lie that we've bought in this generation. We can multitask. I can watch my phone. I can check my notifications while I work. I can have a show going. Multitasking really doesn't work. And Jesus never rushed through an encounter. He didn't multitask healing. He didn't offer half-hearted attention. He consistently gave people his whole presence. And again in the Gospels, we see Jesus pausing and looking and connecting with those who are often overlooked by the world. And our kids today, they feel overlooked. They feel forgotten. They feel less than in an age of perfection of social media. In Mark 10:21, we read that Jesus looked at him and loved him. That was a moment of sacred stillness between Jesus and the young rich ruler. He looked at him and he loved him. That's what we need to be doing with our families. In Luke 8:48, Jesus stops right in the middle of a frantic crowd, he turns to a woman who had touched his garment. He addresses her not with annoyance. Hey, and he was on his way, by the way, at that moment to heal Jairus' daughter, a respected community leader. He was on his way. He stopped. He was not annoyed. He looked at her. He said, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace." Even in moments of urgency, and this is somewhere where I fail every way and every day. My kids can tell you I am working on this. I am asking God to help me. But in Mark 5, he's on his way to heal a dying child. He does not bypass the one in front of him. We cannot bypass our family who's in front of us because of the worry that we have down the road. He looked people in their eyes. He called people by their name. He restored dignity with physical healing. And his ministry taught us that healing begins with being fully seen. Real presence is a kind of miracle, really, in today's day and age. And in our modern screen-saturated lives, we have unintentionally traded this sacred gift of presence for what we think is productivity, what we think is success. You might have heard me talk about the term phubbing, P-H-U-B-B-I-N-G, phone snubbing someone in favor of a phone. That's just a common part of family life now. We check our notifications during dinner. We scroll while our kids talk. We split our attention in ways that silently say something else, whatever's on this phone, whatever is on this screen, it matters more than you do. And it's not intentional, but it deeply impacts our family's sense of worth, their sense of security. And eye contact, which is a natural part of daily interaction, that's replaced by staring at a little blue box. But we know that neuroscience confirms what Scripture shows us. We know that eye contact matters. 20 seconds of eye contact releases oxytocin, a bonding hormone. It lowers cortisol and stress. It increases connection and trust. When we look our loved ones in the eyes, we're not just seeing them, we are affirming them. And when we live in a culture of chronic distraction, the truth is that choosing to give someone our undivided attention is countercultural. And as I've just shared with you, it's Christ-like. And as parents, as caregivers, as faith leaders, we have an incredible opportunity to model what Jesus did, to stop, to look, to love the one in front of us with our whole presence. That kind of attention is healing in a broken relationship. It is exactly what our families are longing for us to look not distracted, to look with a look of love. And that invitation matters because you are giving them an offer for a real relationship versus something that's counterfeit. Social media curates attention, not real belonging. Your presence is the only thing that cannot be replaced by a social media algorithm. Our kids are not influenced by just what we say about screens, but what we are doing with our own screen. So when we put down our phone, we're not just unplugging from technology, we're choosing to connect with them. And when we are trying to form souls inside of our homes, we need some silence because that constant noise crowds out God's voice. When we are constantly distracting ourselves, we constantly have some media going, we can't hear God talking to us. And God often speaks to us in a whisper and a still small voice. And we need to leave some space for that in a tech-free zone. Now, why is it so hard? That's a question I get. Why is this so hard? Well, it's cultural. Digital connection is the norm. Going against it feels awkward. It feels isolating. I can't tell you how many moms in particular have come up to me and said, I have told my kids they can't have a phone, they can't have social media, and I'm being ostracized by my friend group. Friend, I see you and I cheer you on. Now, rules without relationship leads to rebellion. You've probably heard that phrase before, but in the context of a healthy relationship, go for it. Don't be afraid to be that mom. Don't be afraid to be countercultural. Normalize the discomfort of doing things differently, saying, hey, we're building healthy habits. We're countercultural. That's just how we roll. Normalize it. It's also hard because it's convenient. Screens keep kids occupied, and tech-free moments require more of us. It requires more of our attention, our effort. They're more likely to make a mess, if I'm just being honest. But so does discipleship. It requires more effort. Convenience is not the compass of a Christ-centered home. It is just not. And if we're doing things just because they're convenient, that's not a good enough motivation. It's also hard because it's emotional. Devices are numbing, they're soothing, they're even part of how we connect. So be gentle with yourself and your family. Give yourself grace and space to be human. It's not a tear down, it's a rebuild. So instead of tearing someone down for being on their phone too much, help them rebuild those habits, offer them a compelling alternative. So if you're going to do this with your family, if you think, all right, we have way left the station, we are way off course, then it's never too late to start again. So start with the why. Just sit down with your family and cast a shared vision. What do we want more of in our home? And then designate those times, those tech-free times, not just empty gaps, but what are we going to do instead? Maybe that's family meal hour. Everyone puts their phone in a basket. Maybe that's a Sabbath moment where that's a tech-free zone where we don't have our phones in church. We don't have our phones at the table. Maybe that's a bedtime blessing. You don't just want to power off. Power into God. Power into connecting with each other, power into those moments of connection. And you want to build rhythms, not rules. So predictability helps. Just saying, hey, this summer we're going to try out something. Friday nights are going to be a tech-free time. We're going to have a screen-free game night. You might have groans, you might have protests, and you might have requests. Can we do it again next Friday? You never know. Let kids help create the plan because ownership increases buy-in. They're going to be more likely to do it. And don't just remove stuff. You got to replace it. Don't remove screens, replace them. Because that tech-free time, it's got to feel like a gain. It can't feel like a loss. It can't feel like a punishment. So do a family challenge, have an outdoor play, do something different. And we've got to model that message. Adults go first. If you are checking your phone at the table, your kids are going to check your phone at the table too. So preach presence with your habits, not just your words. And you are not alone in this. Romans 12:2 says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And we can look to Galatians for the fruits of the Spirit. Those flourish in stillness, in presence, in discipline. And parents, you are absolutely irreplaceable because influencers may be entertaining your kids, but only you are going to really shape their soul. You have the incredible privilege of doing that. So I invite you to pray over this. If you're feeling convicted, just invite the Holy Spirit to give you wisdom, to give you discernment, to help you guard your home's atmosphere. And pray that God would help you to see where you need some tech-free zones. That may be talking about having digital discernment, asking reflective questions. How do you feel after you sat and scrolled for 3 hours? You don't feel very good. But make those tech-free moments feel special. Maybe it's a s'mores night. Maybe it's a photo scrapbook. Listen, choosing presence is choosing to believe that real life is better than online life, than virtual life. Tech-free times aren't about escaping the world. It's about forming families who live in it with clarity and courage and Christ at the center. You're not just managing screen time, you're cultivating a family legacy. And as you do, I pray the Lord will bless you and keep you and make his face shine upon you. Have a great weekend. I'll see you back here on Monday.